Have you ever been in a room, maybe at a gathering, at work, or even just sitting somewhere public, and you suddenly felt it? That quiet, steady presence of someone watching you. Not staring, not glancing, just watching. You looked up, and there they were. Eyes on you, calm, still. No expression you could easily read, and then, almost as if nothing happened, they looked away. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they held your gaze for just a second longer than felt comfortable. And in that moment, something shifted inside you. A question formed in the back of your mind that you couldn't quite shake. What are they thinking? Why are they watching me like that? And more importantly, what does it mean? Most people would brush that off. They'd tell themselves it was nothing. Just someone lost in thought, maybe zoning out, maybe bored. And sure, sometimes that's exactly what it is. But here's the thing most people never stop to consider. Sometimes the person watching you quietly is doing something far more complex than you realize. They're not distracted. They're not zoning out. They are processing you. And what's happening behind that silence is deeper, more layered, and more psychologically significant than almost anyone gives it credit for. That's what we're going to unpack today. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will never look at a quiet observer the same way again. Before we go deeper, if this kind of content speaks to you, if you've ever wanted to understand people on a level most never reach, take a second to subscribe and drop a like. It really helps this channel grow, and it tells me you want more of this. Stay with me on this one, because what's coming next is going to change the way you read silence forever. Let's start with what most people assume. When someone watches you without speaking, without engaging, the default interpretation is usually one of two things. Either they're shy or they're being weird. That's it. That's the depth most people go to, shy or strange. But psychology tells us something very different. The act of quietly observing another person, especially consistently, especially with calm focus, is often a sign of heightened cognitive processing. It's not absence of thought. It's the opposite. It's an excess of thought, organized in silence. There's a concept in behavioral psychology, sometimes referred to as passive social analysis. It describes individuals who gather enormous amounts of information about others not through conversation, but through observation. They study microexpressions, the way someone shifts their weight when they're uncomfortable, how a person's voice changes slightly when they're being dishonest, the speed at which someone blinks when they feel exposed. These are not things most people notice consciously. But a quiet observer does, and they do it without saying a word. Now here's where it starts to get interesting. Not every quiet observer is the same. There are patterns, profiles, psychological tendencies that shape why someone watches you in silence. And understanding these profiles changes everything about how you interpret the behavior. The first profile is the analytical observer. This is someone who processes the world primarily through watching, not through talking. They tend to be deep thinkers, often introverted, but not always. And they find that they understand people better when they're not caught up in the act of speaking. For them, silence is a tool. It clears the noise and lets them see what's really happening beneath the surface. If you've ever met someone who seems to know things about you that you never told them, someone who picks up on your mood before you even express it, chances are you've encountered this type. They weren't reading your mind. They were reading your behavior, quietly, patiently, and with remarkable accuracy. The second profile is the emotionally guarded observer. This one is more complex. These are people who watch because they feel deeply, but they've learned, often through painful experience, that expressing those feelings openly leads to vulnerability they're not ready for. So instead of engaging, they observe. They take you in from a distance, not because they don't care, but because they care more than they're comfortable showing. This is the person who remembers small details about you, who notices when something's off, who seems to understand you without ever having a deep conversation. Their silence isn't indifference. It's a form of emotional self-protection. And that distinction matters more than most people think. The third profile is the strategically aware observer. This one might surprise you. Some people watch quietly because they are assessing dynamics, reading the room, measuring how people relate to one another. This doesn't make them manipulative by default, though it can lean that way in certain cases. Often, these are people who grew up in environments where they had to be hyper-aware of others' emotions to stay safe. Children who grew up in unpredictable households, for example, often develop an extraordinary ability to read people. They learned early on that watching carefully could tell them when tension was rising, when someone's mood was about to shift, when it was safe to speak, and when it was better to stay quiet. That skill follows them into adulthood, and it shows up as calm, focused, quiet observation. And I want to pause here for just a moment because I know this channel uses an AI-generated voice, but behind every word of this, there's a real person. My name is Fernando, and I genuinely appreciate you being here right now. I hope life blesses you endlessly. Now let's keep going, because what comes next goes even deeper. There's a fourth profile that people rarely talk about, and it's the one that tends to be most misunderstood: the insecure observer. This is the person who watches you quietly, not out of confidence or analytical strength, but out of fear. They're watching because they're trying to figure out where they stand. They want to know if you like them, if you approve of them, if they're safe around you. Their observation isn't powered by curiosity or depth, it's powered by anxiety. And the difference between this and the other profiles is usually visible in the body language. The insecure observer tends to avoid holding eye contact for long. They look away quickly when noticed. Their posture might close off, arms crossed, shoulders turned slightly away, as if ready to retreat. Whereas the analytical or emotionally guarded observer holds space more comfortably, even in silence. This is where context becomes everything. The same behavior, watching someone quietly, can mean entirely different things depending on who's doing it and why. And the clues are almost always in the nonverbal details. Eye contact duration, facial micro-expressions, body orientation, proximity, whether they lean in or pull back, whether their gaze is soft or sharp, whether they watch you when you're speaking to others or only when you're alone. Let me give you an example that might hit close to home. Imagine someone you know, a friend, a coworker, maybe even someone you're interested in romantically. You've noticed that they watch you when they think you're not looking. They don't say much, but when they do, it's specific. They remember something you said weeks ago. They notice when you change something small about your appearance. They seem to track your energy in a room, even from a distance, and yet they never make a move. They never say what they feel. They just watch. What is that? Is it interest? Is it admiration? Is it something more guarded, more complicated? According to research on attachment styles and social behavior, this kind of quiet attention often comes from someone with a deep internal world who struggles with direct emotional expression. They feel drawn to you, but something inside them, maybe past rejection, maybe fear of vulnerability, maybe simply their wiring, keeps them at a distance. The watching becomes their way of being close to you without the risk of being hurt. It's intimacy through observation. And when you understand that, it reframes the entire dynamic. But here's where I want to introduce something that most people don't consider, and that most videos like this won't tell you. Quiet observation isn't always safe. It isn't always rooted in admiration or emotional complexity. Sometimes, watching someone in silence is a form of control. There are individuals who observe others not to understand them, but to gain leverage over them. They study patterns so they can predict behavior. They watch reactions so they can learn how to influence outcomes. This isn't common, but it exists. And the difference between someone watching you because they care and someone watching you because they want to control you is something you should never ignore. The key signals to watch for are consistency without warmth, a fixed gaze that doesn't soften, observation that feels like monitoring rather than noticing, and a pattern of using what they've observed to redirect conversations, subtly pressure you, or make you feel like you're always being evaluated. If someone's quiet attention makes you feel seen, that's usually a good sign. But if it makes you feel surveilled, trust that instinct. Your nervous system picks up on the difference even before your conscious mind does. Now let's go deeper into something that I think will resonate with a lot of you on a personal level. There's a psychological phenomenon that doesn't get talked about enough. It's the idea that the people who observe you most closely are often the ones who feel the most for you but say the least. Think about that for a moment. The loudest person in the room isn't always the one paying the most attention. In fact, research on social dynamics suggests that the people who talk the most in group settings are often the least observant. They're focused on output, on being heard, on occupying space. But the quiet ones, the ones who sit back and watch, they're absorbing everything. They're building an internal map of who you are. And they're doing it because, on some level, you matter to them enough to study. This is why the quiet observer in your life might be the person who understands you best. Not the one who asks you 100 questions. Not the one who tells you they care every day. But the one who notices when your laugh sounds different. The one who catches the slight hesitation in your voice when you say you're fine. The one who watches you walk into a room and can tell within seconds whether you're actually okay or just performing okay for everyone else. That kind of attention is rare, and it's almost always born from depth of feeling, not from emptiness. But here's the part most people miss, and this is where I want you to really lean in. When someone who has always watched you quietly suddenly stops, that change is significant. It's not random. It's not them getting bored. In many cases, it means something inside them has shifted. Maybe they've decided you're not safe. Maybe they've pulled back because they felt too exposed. Maybe they realized their feelings were too strong for a distance they couldn't close. Or maybe, and this one is the hardest to accept, maybe they've started to let go. And the silence that once meant attention now means withdrawal. This is the shadow side of the quiet observer. Their presence is subtle, so when it leaves, you might not notice right away. But eventually, you feel it. That sense that someone who once tracked your every move has stopped looking. That someone who used to catch your eye across the room now keeps their gaze down. And when that happens, it often means you've lost something that was never spoken but was always there. Pay attention to the people who pay attention to you. Not the ones who announce their loyalty, but the ones who show it through quiet consistency. The ones who remember. The ones who notice. The ones who watch not because they're bored, not because they're strange, but because they've chosen you as someone worth understanding. That kind of attention is one of the most honest forms of human connection. It doesn't perform. It doesn't demand anything back. It simply exists in the space between silence and seeing. And if you're the quiet observer, if you're the one who has always watched more than you've spoken, who has always felt more than you've expressed, I want you to hear this. Your way of connecting is not broken. It's not less valid because it's less visible. The depth at which you process people, the care behind your silence, the weight of everything you notice but never say, that is a kind of emotional intelligence that the world desperately needs but rarely recognizes. You are not distant. You are deeply, quietly present. And the people who are worthy of your attention will eventually feel it, even if you never say a single word. So the next time you catch someone watching you quietly, don't rush to a conclusion. Don't assume it's nothing, and don't assume it's something threatening. Instead, look at the context. Read the body language. Notice whether their gaze carries warmth or weight. And then ask yourself, what might they be feeling that they're not saying? Because in a world that's obsessed with noise, with constant talking, constant performing, constant proving, the person who chooses to simply watch, to simply notice, to simply be present in silence, that person might be telling you more than anyone else in the room ever could. They just happen to be saying it without a single word.